I always thought I would die in this house. Every morning for over 40 years, I woke up to the creaking floorboards on the second floor. You know, wood breathes, especially old wooden houses built in the 60s. I bought this two-story house on Cherry Street in Grand Forks long before real estate prices skyrocketed. Doris and I moved in young, not yet sure how to manage our own place. She planted a maple tree in front of the house now. It towers over the roof, sprawling and mighty. Doris passed away 5 years ago. Lung cancer. Detected too late, too quickly. She hated hospitals, so she spent her last weeks at home in our bedroom. I slept next to her, on a cot, so I could always be close at hand. Even when the morphine made her consciousness cloudy, she would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and call for me. I would hold her hand until she fell asleep again. After she died, the house seemed huge and empty. At first I considered selling it. Too many memories, too much silence. But then I began to notice how attached I was to those walls. The creaky stairs, the old kitchen with the wooden cabinets Doris and I painted together, to the backyard garden where she grew tomatoes and I built a gazebo. Our son Felton lived an hour away, in Fargo. He visited me every weekend, sometimes bringing my grandson Connor. I was always more behind the wheel of the truck than around my son. The long years as a trucker didn't foster a close bond. But after Doris died, Felton and I grew closer. He helped me with paperwork. I learned to cook something other than scrambled eggs and sandwiches. We even started going fishing together like when he was a kid. And then the accident happened. Ice, oncoming traffic, drunk driver. Felton was only 42. I didn't talk to anyone for almost a month, just sat in my chair and stared out the window. Old friends would drop by, bring food, try to make conversation. But what can you say when you're burying your own child? One morning, about 6 weeks after the funeral, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood Rachel, my sister-in-law, carrying 2 large suitcases. Behind her loomed Connor, a 13-year-old with a backpack over his shoulders and a lost look. "We're moving in with you, Eugene," she said in a tone that implied no objection. "I can't pay rent alone in Fargo anymore, and Connor needs stability." What could I say? Of course I let them in. Connor is my flesh and blood, the only thing left of Felton, and the house is too big for a lonely old man. There are 4 bedrooms, mine, Felton's former nursery, the guest room, and the little room Doris used for sewing. There was plenty of room. The first weeks passed in a kind of strange harmony. Rachel cooked dinners, better than my clumsy attempts. Connor and I sometimes watched baseball on TV. The boy was quiet, but I thought his grandfather's presence soothed him. I stayed out of his way with questions and advice. I knew how annoying moralizing could be, especially when you were 13 and had just lost your father. The crack in our delicate balance appeared about 2 months later. I returned from a morning fishing trip with Garth, an old friend of mine, to find Doris's chair gone from the living room. An old, dark green upholstered chair with worn armrests and a dent from her body. She often sat there with her knitting or a book, and I settled across from her in my chair. "Rachel?" I called out, standing in the middle of the living room with my raincoat wet from the rain in my hands. She came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Yes, Eugene? Where's Doris's chair?" "Oh," she waved her hand somewhere to the side. "I gave it to Charity. It was so old and shabby. I've ordered a new sofa. It'll be delivered next week." I felt something clench in my chest. "You what?" "Look," she stepped closer, putting a hand on my shoulder. "I understand that you have memories connected to him, but we need to move on. Connor's growing up. He needs space. This house is stuck in time." I remained silent. What was the use of arguing? I couldn't get the chair back. But I couldn't sleep that night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how easily Doris had been cut out of this house with a wave of the hand. After that, it was as if Rachel had been given unspoken permission to change anything she wanted. First, The pictures disappeared, not all of them, but many, especially the ones with just Doris or the two of us in them. In their place came new ones. Connor at school events, Rachel with her friends, Felton with Connor. I didn't mind the new pictures, but the absence of the old ones felt like an open wound. Then the renovations began. Just to freshen up the interior, Rachel explained, showing me paint samples for the walls. Mint green instead of cream in the living room. Gray blue instead of beige in the kitchen. I nodded, seeing no point in arguing over wall color. But more on that next. One day I returned from my weekly trip to the bowling club and discovered that some of my stuff from the hall closet had disappeared. Old jackets, scarves, hats that I rarely wore but had kept for years. I cleared out some space, Rachel explained over dinner. Connor needs somewhere to store his sports uniforms and winter stuff. I was silent again. After all, the closet is big and the stuff is really old. But for the first time, I felt like an intruder in my own home. By the end of their first year together, Rachel had completely remodeled the first floor. New furniture, new curtains, new dishes. Even the wallpaper in the hallway, which Doris and I had picked out together, was replaced with solid color paint. My chair remained the only island of the past in a sea of change. "Eugene," she said one evening, "I think we should rearrange the furniture in your bedroom. That old set is taking up too much space, and the dresser looks like it's about to fall apart." I shook my head. "No, Rachel, my bedroom stays as is." She pursed her lips. "But this furniture is so old-fashioned and the dresser is really wobbly." "I'll fix it myself. Don't touch my bedroom." It was the first time I openly objected, and Rachel backed down, but I could see the resentment in her eyes. And I knew it wasn't over. My life had narrowed to a few islands in my own home, my bedroom, my chair, the old shed in the backyard where I kept tools and fishing gear. The rest of the space was slowly but surely becoming Rachel's territory. By the time Connor turned 14, the tension had become almost palpable. Rachel didn't hide her irritation when I left a dirty mug on the kitchen table or forgot to take my shoes off in the hallway. I tried to be neater, but 65 years of habits aren't easy to change. That morning, when everything finally went to shit, I woke up to the sound of a drill. Coming downstairs, I saw an unfamiliar man drilling holes in the living room wall. "What's going on?" I asked, still in my pajamas and with mussed hair. Rachel came out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee. "Good morning, Eugene. This is Derek. He's installing the new TV. I've decided it's time for us to upgrade to something more modern than this ancient box." I looked at my old TV standing on the nightstand in the corner. It worked quite well, though it wasn't slim like the modern models. "Rachel," I said, trying to speak calmly, "we haven't discussed buying a new TV. Oh, I thought it would be a nice surprise." Connor was so excited when I told him. "It's not about the TV." I felt a wave of anger rising. "It's about you making decisions about my house without consulting me." Rachel set the cup on the table and crossed her arms over her chest. "Eugene, I've lived here for almost 2 years now. I try to make this house cozy for all of us, especially Connor. Is that such a bad thing?" "It's not about cozy, it's about respect. You're changing things, throwing out my stuff, making repairs, all without a word with me. Because you resist any change." Her voice grew louder. "This house is stuck in the last century." I looked at the foreman, who froze awkwardly with a drill in his hand. "I'm sorry," I told him, "but you'll have to come back another day. We're not ready to install the TV today." Rachel's face contorted with anger. "No, Derek, keep working. The TV will be installed today." "This is my house," I said quietly but firmly, "and I say no work will be done today." Rachel stepped so close to me that I could smell her minty toothpaste. "Do you really think you're still in control? Look around you, Eugene. This house hasn't been yours for a long time. You're just an old man clinging to the past." I felt the blood rush to my face. My name is on the deed to the house. I pay the taxes and bills. This is my house, Rachel, whether you like it or not." She laughed, but there was no mirth in her laughter. "Papers. They're just pieces of paper. The reality is that I take care of this house. I'm making it livable. I'm making a family here for Connor. And you? You've just been sitting in your chair feeling sorry for yourself since Doris died." I recoiled like a slap in the face. Never before had she spoken of Doris with such coldness. "Get out," I whispered. "Take Connor and get out of my house." Her eyes narrowed. "And where will we go? Do you have another house for us? No? Then you'll have to accept that we're here, and with me making the decisions." I could file for eviction. "Really?" She laughed again. "And what will Connor say when he finds out his grandfather kicked him out on the street? Do you think he'll ever forgive you?" I remained silent, realizing she was right. I couldn't kick Connor out. I couldn't take the roof over his head, especially after everything he'd been through. Rachel saw my confusion and smiled. "Exactly. So get over it, Eugene. This isn't your home anymore. You're nobody here." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room, which I no longer recognized, feeling like the ground was leaving under my feet. I didn't sleep a wink that night. As I lay staring at the ceiling, Rachel's words ringing in my ears, "This isn't your home anymore. You're nobody here." Every time I closed my eyes, I could see her face contorted with anger, hear her cold laughter. At 4 in the morning, I got up, cautiously walked down the creaky stairs and out onto the porch. The pre-dawn air was fresh and cool. I sat on an old bench, the same one I'd made with my own hands 30 years ago, and watched the first rays of sunlight color the sky over Grand Forks, my home, my city, my life. And now some woman, albeit my late son's wife, tells me I'm nobody here? The clock on City Hall struck 6 when I got back to the house. Rachel and Connor were still asleep. I quietly made my way to the kitchen, put on the coffee pot, and pulled eggs out of the refrigerator. Cooking always helped me think. Doris often joked that my brain worked better when my hands were busy. By the time Rachel came downstairs at 7 o'clock, I'd already had 2 cups of coffee and made scrambled eggs and bacon. She froze in the kitchen doorway, wary as a cat in front of a stranger. "Good morning," I said, trying to make my voice sound casual. She nodded without looking me in the eye and poured herself some coffee. We ate in silence, avoiding looking at each other. When Connor showed up, sleepy and disheveled, the atmosphere lightened a little. "Hey, Grandpa," he muttered, plopping into a chair. "Hello, lad. Eggs?" He nodded, and I put the eggs and bacon on his plate. The boy began to eat with gusto, not noticing the tension between the adults. "I have practice after school today," he said with his mouth full. "I remember," Rachel nodded. "I'll pick you up at 5. As soon as Connor left for school and Rachel for work, I called Garth. My old friend was the only person I could have a frank conversation with. We'd met back in the 80s when I often stopped at his fishing store on my way to the lake. Garth was 3 years older than me, a widower like me, only his Margaret had died of a stroke almost 10 years ago. "Meet me at the Blue Catfish?" I asked, referring to the little cafe near the river where we often had breakfast. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Garth retorted. The Blue Catfish was almost empty at 10 in the morning. Only a couple of old men were drinking coffee at a far table, and the bartender was wiping glasses. Garth and I took our usual seat by the window, which overlooked the river. "You look lousy," Garth remarked, scrutinizing my face. "Been up all night." "Because of that bitch?" I sighed. Garth never hid his attitude toward Rachel. Unlike other friends who told me that time heals and you have to be patient for your grandson's sake, Garth had been skeptical from the beginning. She said, "This isn't my home anymore, that I'm nobody here." Garth whistled. "What a bitch." "Garth." "No, Eugene, that's crossing the line. First she changes everything in the house, then she throws Doris's stuff out, and now she's outright telling you to clean. In your own house." I shook my head. She didn't tell me to clean. She just made it clear that I'm no longer the boss in my own house. What are you going to do? I shrugged. I don't know. I can't kick them out. It's not Connor's fault in any way. Where are they going to go? Garth sipped his coffee and looked at me intently. And why should you worry about that? Rachel is a grown woman. She has a job. Let her rent an apartment like any normal person. But Connor won't be lost either. It's not like you're leaving him to fend for himself. Just let them live separately. I sighed. That's easy to say, but she's made it clear she's not leaving willingly. And suing her? Can you imagine what that would do to Connor? Garth tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. Then he leaned toward me and said quietly, almost in a whisper, "What if we sold the house?" I stared at him. "What?" "Sell the house," he repeated, quickly, without too much fuss. "And problem solved." "But it's my house, Garth. Doris and I's house. Every corner of—" "Eugene," he interrupted me. "Listen, I realize that home is a memory to you, but right now it's turning into a battlefield. Rachel won't stop until she's completely displaced you. Do you really want to spend the rest of your days fighting for the right to exist in your own home?" I remained silent, mulling over his words. The thought of selling the house seemed sacrilegious. But on the other hand, wasn't Garth right? Hadn't my house turned into a place where I felt like a stranger? "Besides," Garth continued, "remember Lewis Patterson? He's been talking you into selling him the house for 2 years now. Says it's the perfect place for his daughter and son-in-law who are moving to Grand Forks." I nodded. Lewis, my neighbor 3 houses down, had indeed broached the subject of buying several times. His daughter was expecting their second child, and they needed a bigger house. But I always declined, unable to imagine selling the place where my whole life with Doris had been spent. "He offered good money," Garth reminded me, "more than market value because he really wants this house for his daughter." "Even so," I objected, "where am I going to go? Rent an apartment at my age?" Garth shrugged. "You'll buy something smaller, or move in with me. There's plenty of room since Jimmy left for college. There are options, Eugene. The important thing is to get out of this trap before it eats you alive." I looked out the window at the river slowly flowing by. Doris and I used to picnic there, on the other side of the river, and a little farther upstream was where I taught Felton how to fish. So many memories connected with this town, with this river, with my home. "I'll think about it," I said at last. Garth nodded. "Just don't think too long. People like Rachel, they're like cancer. The longer you wait, the harder it is to get rid of." All day I walked around like I was in a fog. The idea of selling the house, which had seemed absurd at first, was slowly taking root in my mind. I remembered every corner, everything Rachel had thrown away or replaced. Doris's chair, the pictures of us, the wallpaper in the hallway, the old TV she was going to replace without my consent. By late afternoon, I had made a decision. I called Lewis Patterson and made an appointment for the next day. He was surprised but pleased. "I always keep my word, Eugene," he said. "The price I offered before is still on the table." At night I could not sleep again. But now it was not bitterness and resentment, but feverish pondering of details. How to formalize the deal quickly and without too much fuss. What to do with the money. Where to move. And most importantly, how to tell Connor. In the morning I called Maureen Elliott, the realtor with whom Doris and I had once bought this house. She was retired now, but she still sometimes handled transactions for old clients. "Eugene Boyd," she exclaimed when she heard my voice. "Haven't heard from you in ages. How are you?" "Fine, Maureen. Listen, I need your help. I want to sell the house." The pause on the other end was so long I thought the connection had broken. "Maureen?" "I'm here," she echoed. "Just surprised. I thought you always said you'd never sell this house." "Circumstances have changed." She didn't question it, for which I was grateful. "Do you have a buyer in mind?" "Yes, Lewis Patterson. We've already discussed a price, but I need your help with the paperwork and to make sure it goes quickly and quietly." "Quietly?" I sighed. "My grandson and his mother live with me. I don't want complications." Maureen was quiet. "I understand. Well, let's meet today and discuss the details." We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town that I was sure Rachel never visits. Maureen had aged, but still retained the energy and practicality that had made her one of the best realtors in Grand Forks. "So," she said, spreading the papers out on the table, "Lewis Patterson is willing to buy your house for the amount you discussed. That's a very good offer, Eugene, above market price." I nodded. "I know. He wants that house for his daughter." "Good. Now let's talk about how we can speed up the process." Usually selling a house took weeks, if not months, but Maureen knew all the loopholes and shortcuts. Lewis was willing to pay cash, which made the transaction much easier. We agreed that I would sign all the paperwork the next day and the closing would be a week later. "That fast?" I wondered. Maureen shrugged. "Lewis is very motivated, and he has connections at the bank. But most importantly, he's buying with cash, no mortgage. It speeds up the process many times over." When I got home, Rachel was already there, cooking dinner. She acted as if our fight had never happened. She smiled, talked about her day, asked if I wanted a salad to go with my steak. I gave one-word answers, avoiding looking her in the eye. Part of me was afraid she'd see in my gaze the decision I'd made. Connor came back from practice tired but satisfied. He showed me a new move he'd learned in boxing, and I fake oohed when he demonstrated a punch in the air. "You're going to be a champion, kid," I said. And he smiled that rare, open smile that was so reminiscent of Felton at his age. At dinner, I watched them both, Rachel talking about some gossipy guy from work, Connor eating steak and potatoes, and the doubt started to gnaw at me again. Was I doing the right thing? Had I made too drastic a decision? After dinner, when Connor had gone to his room to do his homework and Rachel was watching TV in the living room, I went up to my bedroom and pulled an old shoebox out of the closet. It held the things most precious to me: Doris's wedding ring, which she'd taken off before her surgery and was no longer wearing, a lock of her hair, which I'd cut off after her death, a picture of all four of us: me, Doris, Felton, and little Connor, who was only 3 at the time. I sat on the bed holding the photo in my hands and tears came to my eyes. "I'm sorry, Doris," I whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't keep our home, but I can't live there anymore. Not like this." I imagined what she would say. Probably that a house is just walls, but a real home is where your family is, where you feel safe and loved. Our house was no longer that place. It had become a battlefield where I was always losing. The next day, I signed all the papers in Maureen's office. Lewis was there, excited and grateful. "My Lizzie is going to be so happy," he said, shaking my hand. "You have no idea what this means to our family." I nodded, unable to utter a word. Somewhere deep inside, there was still hope that I was making a mistake, that everything could be fixed, that Rachel would come to her senses. But then I remembered her words, her cold laugh, and my resolve returned. "When do you plan on telling your family?" Maureen asked cautiously when we were alone. "After the deal closes," I answered. "When it's official." She nodded. "That's reasonable. But, Eugene, are you sure you want to go this route? It's rather radical." I looked at the signed documents lying on the table. "I tried to find another way out, Maureen, honestly tried, but she left me no choice." The next few days passed like a blur. I tried to act normal, not to show my excitement. Rachel didn't seem to notice anything, too busy with her plans to further improve the house. She mentioned something about remodeling the bathroom, and I just nodded, thinking that in a few days that would no longer be my problem. On Thursday, Maureen called to let me know everything was ready to close the deal. "Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, she said. All the paperwork is prepared and the money will be transferred to your account as soon as it's signed. I sat in my bedroom for a long time that night, looking at old photographs and reminiscing. Every corner of this house held a piece of my life. This is where Doris first told me she was pregnant. This is where Felton took his first steps. This is where we celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas. This is where Doris died holding my hand. But now this house was a stranger. Rachel was methodically erasing all traces of the past, creating her own space where I had no place. This isn't your home. You're nobody here. Her words still stung like a fresh wound. In the morning, I got up early when everyone was still asleep and quietly walked out of the house. Louis and Maureen were already waiting for me at the notary's office. "Everything okay, Eugene?" Maureen asked, noticing my eyes red from sleeplessness. I nodded. "Let's get this over with." It took less than an hour to sign the papers. I handed the keys to Louis. He handed me the check. We shook hands. "You'll always be welcome in this house, Eugene," he said. "Always." As I walked out of the notary's office, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the heavy burden I had been carrying all these months had suddenly disappeared. I was free. No more fighting for a place in my own home, no more trying to keep what was already lost. But along with relief came anxiety. What now? Where to go? How to tell Rachel and Connor? I pushed those thoughts away. I needed to focus on practical matters now. I headed to the bank to deposit a check. Then I stopped by Garth, who offered to let me stay with him until I found a new place to live. "You really did it," he said when I told him about the sale. I nodded. "Yes, the house is no longer mine." He clapped me on the shoulder. "I'm proud of you, old man. Not everyone could find the strength to make a decision like that." "The hard part is ahead," I sighed. "I need to tell them." Garth hesitated. "How do you plan to do that?" "I don't know. Just tell the truth, I guess." "And Connor? What are you going to tell him?" I shook my head. "That's what pains me the most. I don't want him to think I'm leaving him. But I can't live with Rachel anymore either." "He'll understand," Garth said confidently. "Maybe not right away, but he'll understand. It's not like you're disappearing from his life. You'll just be living apart." I hoped he was right. Connor was the only reason I'd put up with Rachel's behavior for so long. The thought that I might lose touch with my grandson was unbearable. All day I prepared for the upcoming conversation, mentally choosing my words, imagining Rachel's and Connor's reactions. When I got back to the house, now my former home, it was about 6 in the evening. Rachel's car was parked in the driveway. They were both home. I took a deep breath before opening the door. One thought was swirling around in my head. This is the right decision. There's no other way out. The evening was surprisingly quiet. Rachel was in the kitchen cooking something flavorful, and Connor was sitting at the kitchen table with his textbooks. When I walked in, they both looked up. "Hey, Grandpa." Connor smiled his rare but genuine smile at me. "Hey, kid." I patted him on the shoulder. "Math?" "Yep, algebra," he grimaced, showing his attitude toward the subject. Rachel was stirring something in a pot. For a moment I saw in that scene what could have been a real family, a warm home, a cozy place. If only she hadn't tried to cut me out of that picture. "Where have you been all day?" Rachel asked without turning around. There was no real interest in her voice, more of a duty question. "Things to do," I answered evasively. The envelope in the inside pocket of my jacket felt like it was burning my skin. The official notice to sell the house that Maureen had helped me prepare. 30 days for eviction was the maximum I could give them by law. I didn't drag it out. When we sat down to dinner, I coughed and said, "I have something to tell you." Rachel looked up from her plate, a flicker of concern in her eyes. Connor continued to eat, immersed in his thoughts. "I sold the house," I said in a flat voice. Silence. Absolute silence, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. An old clock Doris had bought at a flea market back in the 90s. What? Rachel set her fork aside. Her voice sounded quiet, like she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. I sold the house, I repeated. The deal closed yesterday morning. We have 30 days to move out. Connor stopped chewing and shifted his gaze from me to his mother, clearly not understanding what was going on. You couldn't do that, Rachel shook her head slowly. You couldn't just take the house and sell it without telling us. I pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. Here's the official notice. The new owner moves in 30 days. Rachel grabbed the envelope, ripped it open, and quickly ran her eyes over the document. Her face began to change. Disbelief was replaced by shock, then anger. You really did it, she gasped. You sold the house out from under us without even consulting us. How could you? It's my house, Rachel, I replied, emphasizing the word my, and I have every right to sell it. But we live here, Connor and me. Where are we going to go now? Connor looked at us with wide-open eyes. Are we moving? He asked quietly. I turned to my grandson. Yeah, kid. But don't worry, it's going to be okay. You'll have a new home. With you? His voice shook. I hesitated and Rachel seized the moment. She jumped up, knocking over a chair. No, not with him. Your grandfather decided to throw us out on the street. He sold the house without even thinking about us. I'm not throwing you out on the street, I objected. You have 30 days to find a new place to live, and I'm willing to help with a down payment or a deposit. 30 days? Rachel laughed, but there was no mirth in her laughter. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a place in Grand Forks in 30 days, especially with a baby? You work. You have a steady income. It shouldn't be a problem. Rachel shook her head. Don't pretend to care about us. You're just getting back at me for that conversation we had, aren't you? For telling me this isn't your house? I didn't answer. I didn't want to find out in front of Connor, who already looked scared. Connor, go to your room, please, I said softly. Your mom and I need to talk. No. Rachel grabbed her son's arm. He's not going anywhere. Let him know what kind of man his grandfather is. Let him see how easily you throw your family away. I'm not throwing anyone away. My voice got louder than I wanted it to. I just sold my house. The house where you tried to humiliate and survive me. The house where you told me I was a nobody. Connor ripped his arm out of his mother's grasp and ran out of the kitchen. We heard the door of his room slam. Rachel looked at me with undisguised hatred. You're a miserable, petty old man, Eugene. What are you going to do? Where are you going to live? I've already taken an apartment, I answered, on Elm Street. It's not big, but it'll be enough for me. And there'll always be room for Connor if he wants to stay there. He won't be staying at your place, Rachel hissed. After what you've done, you betrayed us, Eugene. Felton would roll over in his coffin if he knew what you're doing to his family. The mention of Felton was a low blow. I felt the blood rush to my face. Don't you dare use his name. Don't you dare say what he would think. You have no idea. I'm his wife. Rachel pounded her fist on the table. I knew him better than anyone, and I know he would never forgive you for this. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. Look, Rachel, I don't want to fight. What's done is done. The house is sold. We have 30 days to pack up and move out. I'll help you find a new place to live, and I'm not going to disappear from Connor's life. Oh, now you're saying us? She shook her head. It's too late, Eugene. You've already shown that you think only of yourself. And do you really think I'm going to let you see Connor after this? You have no right to forbid me from seeing my grandson. We'll see. She crossed her arms over her chest. I'm his mother, and I have every right. With those words, she walked out of the kitchen, leaving me sitting at the table. I'd expected anger, but the threat of depriving me of Connor's companionship was more painful than I could have imagined. I gave them time to calm down before heading up to the second floor. The door to Connor's room was closed. I knocked gently. "Connor, may I come in?" Silence. Then a quiet one. "Yes." He sat on the bed with his hands on his knees, eyes red. He was crying. "Hey, kid." I sat down next to him. "I'm sorry you found out about the move this way. I should have talked to you in private." "Why did you sell the house?" he asked bluntly. "You don't want us to live with you?" I sighed. "That's not the point, Connor. I love you, and I always want you to be a part of my life. But your mom and I have had a disagreement, serious disagreements, and sometimes it's better to live apart than to fight all the time under the same roof." "Because of Mom changing houses?" I nodded. "Partly, but it's not just about the altercations. It's about respect and how we treat each other. Your mom, she has her own vision of what a house should be, and in that vision, I have less and less room for me." Connor looked down at his hands. "She says you're kicking us out." "I'm not kicking you out, Connor. I sold the house we all lived in. We're going to live separately now, but that doesn't mean we'll stop being a family. I'll always be your grandfather, and you can always come to me." "But Mom said—" "Your mom is upset right now, and I understand her. Change is scary, especially when it comes unexpectedly. But she'll get through it. You'll both cope, and I'll help." He looked up at me. "Do you really want me to come to you?" "Of course. I have a second bedroom in my new apartment, a very small one, but it's yours whenever you want it. We'll still go fishing, watch baseball, do all the things we like to do together." The next few days were filled with tense silence. Rachel avoided me, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. Connor was quiet and withdrawn. On the fourth day after my announcement, I found Rachel at the kitchen table with a pile of papers and a laptop. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "An apartment," she answered briefly. "But you'll probably be happy to know that's next to impossible. There are hardly any apartments available in Grand Forks now, and the ones that are too expensive for a single mother with a child. I told you I'd help with the money. I don't need your handouts." "It's not a handout, Rachel. It's helping your grandson." She looked up. "You know what? I talked to a lawyer. He thinks I can contest the sale of the house." I felt a chill run down my spine. "On what grounds?" "On the fact that it's a family dwelling, that Connor has rights to this house as Felton's heir." "It's my house, Rachel. I bought it long before Felton was born, and it was never titled to him." "That still has to be proven in court," she looked at me challengingly. "And while the court is hearing the case, we're not moving anywhere." The next day, I received a letter from Miller and Associates, the law firm representing Rachel. They demanded all documents related to the sale of the house and warned of an injunction against the transfer of title. I immediately met with attorney Alan Prather, who assured me that Rachel had no legal grounds to contest the sale. "Mr. Boyd," he said, "your sister-in-law doesn't stand a chance. The house has always been registered in your name only. You are the sole owner, and you have every right to sell it." 2 days later, I returned home to find Rachel and Connor's belongings gone. On Connor's bed was a note. "We moved in with Tanya. Don't look for us." The next day, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Grandpa, this is Connor. We're at Tanya's aunt's house. I'm fine. Mom doesn't know I'm texting you." I immediately replied, "Thanks for writing, kid. I'm glad you're okay. You can come see me anytime. I live on Elm Street now, building 22, apartment 7. Mom says we're going to sue for the house. Don't worry about that, Connor. The adults will sort it out. It's not your fault in any way." "I know. I have to go. Mom's coming back." 2 days later, I received another letter from Rachel's lawyers. They notified me that they had filed a lawsuit in court to invalidate the sale of the house and a motion for a temporary restraining order against the transfer of title. Alan Prater assured me they were bluffing and had no real case. "Don't worry, Mr. Boyd. I've already prepared our response. We will file a motion to immediately dismiss the suit for lack of legal merit. That same evening, Lewis, the buyer of the house, called me worried. Eugene, I got a strange letter from some lawyers. They say your sister-in-law is contesting the sale of the house and that I can't move in until the court rules. What's going on? Don't worry, Lewis. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. My lawyer says she doesn't stand a chance. It's just an attempt at pressure. But if there's an injunction, there won't be one. The judge will dismiss the suit at the preliminary hearing. I guarantee that you and your daughter will move into the house within the agreed-upon time frame. The preliminary hearing was scheduled in a week. I was nervous, although Alan assured me there was nothing to worry about. On the day of the trial, I wore my only suit, which I hadn't worn since Felton's funeral. In the courtroom, I saw Rachel for the first time in days. She looked confident, even arrogant. Next to her sat a young man in an expensive suit, apparently her lawyer. The hearing was short. Judge Marks, an elderly woman with a shrewd eye, listened carefully to the arguments of both sides, studied the documents, and ruled. The plaintiff's motion for a temporary injunction against the transfer of ownership is denied. The claim to invalidate the sale is rejected for lack of legal grounds. Case dismissed. Rachel's face contorted with shock and rage. She whispered something furiously to her attorney, but he only shook his head. "Congratulations," Alan said to me as we walked out of the courtroom. "Like I said, they didn't stand a chance." I looked at Rachel, who was standing in the hallway staring at her phone. She looked lost and broken. "Rachel," I walked over to her, "my offer to help with the money still stands." She looked up at me with eyes full of hate. "Go to hell, Eugene. This isn't over." Chapter 4. Second Surprise. 2 weeks flew by. I was settling into my new rental apartment on Elm Street, small but cozy. 1 bedroom for me, a tiny room I was making for Connor when he came to visit, and a living room with a kitchen area. Nothing fancy, but it was enough for me. I hung up a few pictures of Doris, Felton, and Connor that I'd managed to pick up from the house, arranged books and my fishing trophies. Gradually, the faceless rental began to take on the appearance of a home. There were occasional messages from Connor. He wrote that he and Rachel were still staying with her friend Tanya, and that Mom had been looking for a new apartment all day, but with no luck. I worried about him, but was glad for at least this meager contact. I hadn't heard from Rachel since that day in court. Her last words, "This isn't over," occasionally came to mind, but I tried not to think about them. The court ruled. The house officially passed to Lewis, who had already begun renovations for his daughter and son-in-law. Life had moved on. One evening, as I was returning from a fishing trip with Garth, my phone rang. The number was an unfamiliar one. "Hello?" I answered, holding the phone to my ear with my healthy hand and trying to open the apartment door with the other. "Eugene? It's Rachel." I froze with the key in the keyhole. Her voice sounded unfamiliar, not angry, not demanding, but tired and kind of defeated. "Rachel? Is something wrong? Is Connor okay?" "He's fine. I need to talk to you. In person." I finally opened the door and stepped into the apartment. "Okay. When? Is today okay? I know it's unexpected, but today's fine. Do you know where I live?" Connor said. A note of irritation flashed in her voice, so she knew about our secret correspondence. "I'll be there in an hour." I hung up the phone and looked around the apartment. Not that I was going to spruce things up for Rachel, but I still cleaned up the scattered fishing gear and dirty coffee mug. Then I showered, washing away the smell of river and fish, and changed into a clean shirt and jeans. Exactly an hour later, the doorbell rang. Rachel stood on the doorstep, pale and with dark circles under her eyes. She was alone. "Connor's staying at Tanya's," she said, as if she'd read my mind. "Can I come in?" I stepped back, letting her into the apartment. She glanced around my new abode but refrained from commenting. Coffee? Tea? I offered, closing the door. No thanks. She walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, nervously clutching her purse in her lap. I came to talk about our situation. I sat down in the chair across from her. Listening. Rachel took a deep breath. We still haven't found a place to live. Tanya let us stay for another 2 weeks, but then her mother is coming and we'll have to move out. I've gone around to all the agencies, looked at all the ads. There's nothing suitable. And what there is requires a huge deposit, which I can't afford. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. This was about what I was preparing myself for when I saw her on the doorstep. I need your help, Eugene, she finally squeezed out. Financial help. I know you offered it before and I turned it down. But now, for Connor's sake, I'm willing to accept it. What exactly do you need? I asked, trying to keep my voice sounding neutral. An apartment deposit and a down payment. That's about $4,000. I found a pretty good 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. It's not ideal, but it'll do until I find something better. I was quiet for a moment, mulling over her words. $4,000 is a serious amount of money, Rachel. I know. She raised her voice but immediately pulled herself together. I know, and I'm not asking for it for nothing. I can sign a receipt, set up a payment schedule. Whatever you say. It's not about the receipt. I'm just surprised you came to me. After all that's been said, she lowered her eyes. I don't have a choice, Eugene. My credit history isn't the best. The bank turned down the loan. I don't have any parents. Tanya can't lend me that much money. You are the only option. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking at the street below. Part of me wanted to agree immediately, for Connor's sake, so he could finally get a stable place to live. But another part of me remembered all the insults, all the attempts to force me out of my own home, the threats to cut me off from my grandson's company. And that part said, be careful. Tell me, Rachel, I turned to her, if I give you this money, will you let me see Connor? She looked up. He's your grandson. I was never really going to forbid you from socializing. I was angry, speaking out of temper. Nevertheless, you said it. And now I want clarity. Will I be able to see Connor, take him on weekends, go fishing with him? Yes, she said firmly. Yes, you'll be able to see him. I promise. I sat back in my chair. Okay. But before we go any further, there's something I need to tell you. About the money from the sale of the house. Rachel tensed. What about them? I got $450,000 for the house, I began. That's above market value. Lewis really wanted that house for his daughter. Her eyes widened. Apparently she hadn't expected such an amount. I spent $30,000 of that on paying off old debts and am looking for a small apartment to buy. I'm renting this one temporarily while I look for a better one. I see, Rachel said dryly. And the rest? $50,000 I've kept for living expenses and emergencies. And the rest? I paused, preparing for her reaction. The other $370,000 I put in a trust fund for Connor. Rachel froze. What? A trust fund, in Connor's name. The money will be available to him when he turns 21. Until then, they can only be used for his education or medical treatment if necessary. Rachel's face was changing as I spoke. Surprise was replaced by understanding, then outrage. You put almost all the money from the sale of the house into a fund that neither you nor I have access to? That's right, I nodded. It's Connor's money, his future, his chance at college, at the start of adulthood, maybe buying his own house someday. But what about, why didn't you consult me? I'm his mother. Because it's my money, Rachel, from the sale of my house, and I've decided the best way to use it is to secure my grandson's future. She jumped up, her face contorted with anger. You did that to spite me. You knew I'd need the money after the eviction, and you decided to hide it. No, Rachel, I did it for Connor, Because I want him to have a future, a stable, secure future. What about his present? What about a roof over his head now instead of 7 years from now? I sighed. That's why I kept the 50,000 for myself. Part of it is for you and Connor, for the first time, to set up a new place to live. Rachel froze. What? I'll give you not four, but $10,000. Enough for a deposit, down payments, and the necessary furniture. No receipts or payment schedules. It's a gift for Connor. She slowly sank back onto the couch, stunned. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? After everything I've said, the way I've treated you? Because Connor is all I have left of Felton, and because, no matter what, he's part of my family. And so are you, even though neither of us wants to admit it. Rachel stared at her hands, not knowing what to say. I could see the struggle on her face, pride versus necessity, anger versus gratitude. But I have a condition, I added. She looked up. What is it? You will never, under any circumstances, attempt to access Connor's trust fund. That money is his and his alone, not yours, not mine, his future. Rachel was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, I agree. One more thing. I want to see Connor regularly, not once a month but every week, and take him on weekends sometimes. Agreed, she repeated more quietly. I stood up and walked over to the small secretary in the corner of the room. I opened the drawer, pulled out my checkbook, and wrote a check for $10,000. Turning back to Rachel, I held the paper out to her. Here, this should be enough for the first time. She took the check with trembling hands, looking at the amount. Thank you, she whispered, and I saw tears glisten in her eyes. You're welcome. I looked away, feeling awkward. When do you plan on moving? Yeah, I'll contact the landlord tomorrow. If everything goes well, a week from now. Let me know if you need help moving. I can borrow Garth's pickup truck. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Rachel gathered her wits and asked, This trust fund, how does it work? Who runs it? The North Dakota Bank. They have a special trust administration department. The money is invested in various assets, stocks, bonds, some real estate. By the time Connor turns 21, the amount should grow considerably. What if he needs the money sooner? You said for education or medical treatment. Yes, in those cases, the trustee of the foundation can approve the disbursement. And who is the trustee? You? I shook my head. No, the trustee is appointed by the bank. It's an independent financial advisor. Neither I nor you can influence his decisions. It's done on purpose to protect Connor's interests. Rachel nodded again, mulling over the information. And what happens if something happens to you before he turns 21? The foundation will continue to operate. It's completely independent of me. The money is protected from any claims, including my own debts or bankruptcy. You've thought of everything. Something akin to respect sounded in her voice. I tried, I replied simply. Rachel stood up, folding the check neatly and tucking it away in her purse. I should get going. Connor's waiting. I walked her to the door. On the threshold, she turned around. Eugene, thank you. Not just for the money, for Connor, for thinking about his future. I nodded, not knowing what to say back. Rachel left, and I was left standing at the door, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Relief that things had gone relatively peacefully, satisfaction at the decisions I'd made, and a slight sadness that it had come to this. 3 days later, Rachel called to let me know that they had signed the lease and would be moving in that weekend. I offered to help, and to my surprise, she agreed. Saturday morning, I pulled up to Tanya's house in Garth's pickup truck, ready to move things. Connor ran out to meet me as soon as I parked. Grandpa! He hugged me with unexpected strength. Hey, kid, I hugged him back, feeling a lump in my throat. How are you doing? Fine. We're moving into a new apartment. My mom says it's going to have my own room. That's great. Have you decided how you're going to decorate it yet? He shrugged. Maybe posters of basketball players? I'm watching a lot of NBA right now. That's a great idea. Maybe next week we can go to the store and get some posters? His face lit up with a smile. Really? That would be cool. Rachel came out of the house with a box in her hands. She nodded at me and I noticed she looked better. Still tired, but not so depressed anymore. Good morning, Eugene. Thanks for coming over. You're welcome. Let me help. I took the box from her and carried it to the pickup. We loaded the stuff in a few trips. There wasn't much. Clothes, books, kitchen utensils, Connor's computer, a few boxes of personal items. Rachel had decided to buy new furniture with the money I'd given her. The new apartment was on the east side of Grand Forks in a neighborhood that couldn't be called upscale, but it wasn't a slum. It was an ordinary apartment building built in the 90s. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. A simple but clean apartment on the 3rd floor. We unloaded our stuff and I helped set up what little they had. Rachel ordered pizza and we ate lunch right on the floor, sitting on boxes. Furniture is coming in tomorrow, Rachel said, wiping her hands with a napkin. Sofa, beds, table, and chairs. Nothing fancy, but it'll be enough to get us started. Sounds good, I nodded. If you need help with assembly, just let me know. Thanks, but they promised to assemble everything themselves, she was quiet. Listen, Eugene, I've been meaning to ask. Maybe Connor could stay overnight at your place next weekend? I have a job interview in Fargo on Saturday. I'm going to have to stay there overnight. I looked at her in surprise. Sure, I'd love to. But a job interview? You're changing jobs? She nodded. I'm trying. The construction company doesn't pay as much as I'd like. In Fargo, they're offering a position in the finance department of a big firm. More money, better prospects. What about Connor? School? For now, I'll commute back and forth. It's only an hour by car. If things go well, in a year or 2, we could move to Fargo for good. I glanced at Connor, who was sitting in the corner, tucked away on his phone. Have you talked to him about it? A little bit. He realizes we need the money. I nodded, not wanting to argue. Part of me worried that Connor might move to Fargo, that I'd see him even less often. But the other part understood. Rachel needed this job, they both needed to move on. When it was time to say goodbye, Connor hugged me again. Thank you, Grandpa, for your help, and for, I smiled. You're welcome, kid. I'll see you next weekend, yeah? We'll have a boys' night out. He brightened up. Yeah, it'll be awesome. Rachel walked me to the door. On the threshold, she stopped. Eugene, I know a lot has happened between us, and I know you didn't do it for me. But still, thank you. I nodded. Take care of Connor, and yourself too. Stepping outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. A strange sense of completion swept over me. I had done what I had to do, secured my grandson's future, helped them with a place to live. I'd kept Connor in touch, and in doing so, I protected myself, my dignity, my right to a quiet life. 8 months flew by like a day. Grand Forks bloomed in spring bloom, then burned off the hot summer, and now golden autumn painted the city in bright colors. My life had changed too, and so much so that sometimes when I woke up in the morning, I could hardly believe it was all happening to me. I had left my apartment on Elm Street a long time ago. Now I lived in a small but very cozy house on Maple Alley, 2-story, with a small garden and a veranda. And I lived not alone, but with Mariah Addis, my former neighbor, with whom life had brought me together again in a most unexpected way. That day, in mid-April, I was just leaving the real estate agency, where I was discussing the purchase of a small apartment. On the steps, I literally bumped into a woman who was walking inside. Excuse me, I mumbled, holding her elbow so she wouldn't fall. That's okay. I'll do it myself. Eugene? Eugene Boyd? I looked closely at the woman and recognized Mariah. She lived 3 houses down from us on Cherry Street. Doris and I had been in frequent contact with her and her husband Jack until he died of a stroke about 10 years ago. After his death, Mariah became more withdrawn and then moved away after selling the house. We met occasionally in town, exchanging pleasantries but nothing more. Mariah, what a reunion! I was genuinely excited. How are you? Not bad, considering the circumstances. She smiled, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. And you? I heard you sold the house. Yeah, it's a long story. I have time. She glanced at her watch. If you have half an hour too, why don't we grab a coffee? There's a pretty good coffee shop around the corner. I agreed, and we spent not half an hour but almost 2 hours in that coffee shop, telling each other about our lives. I told her about the conflict with Rachel, about selling the house, about the trust fund for Connor. She told me she had moved back to Grand Forks after 3 years of living with her sister in Minneapolis. It never felt like home there, Mariah sighed. It kept pulling me back. So I came back, and now I'm looking for a place to live. What are you thinking of buying? I'd like a small house. An apartment is not for me. I'm used to my garden, to silence. But prices now. She shook her head. Yes, real estate in Grand Forks has gone up. I remembered the prices I'd been quoted by the agency. We got to talking about the real estate market, about how hard it was to find something suitable on your own. And then Mariah suddenly suggested something that changed everything. What if we joined forces? She asked, looking me straight in the eye. What do you mean? In the direct sense. Buy a house together. You're looking for a place to live. I'm looking for a place to live. You've got money. I've got something saved up too. Together, we could afford something better than we could separately. I was confused. You're suggesting we living together? Why not? She shrugged. We're both single, both at an age when you appreciate quiet and good company. You can choose a house with separate bedrooms, even on different floors if you want. Everyone will have their own space, but common areas too. The idea seemed crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Mariah was a smart, interesting woman. Doris and I had always gotten along well with her, and she was right at our age. Living alone wasn't always easy or safe. A week later, we were looking at houses together. Another month later, we signed the papers to buy a house on Maple Alley. It was a little more expensive than we had planned, but it was perfect. 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, a spacious living room, kitchen, porch, and a small garden. Mariah immediately started planning what flowers she would plant, and I looked out for a workshop space in the garage. It was a little awkward at first. We were both used to living alone. We both had our own habits and rituals. But gradually, a comfortable routine developed for both of us. Mariah loved to cook and didn't mind doing it for 2. I took care of all the chores around the house and garden that required physical strength. In the evenings, we often sat on the veranda, drinking tea and talking about everything in the world: books, city news, our children and grandchildren. Connor was delighted with the new house. He came every weekend and sometimes stayed overnight. I set up a room for him on the 1st floor, which Mariah and I had originally planned to use as an office. I put a bed in there, a desk, and hung posters of basketball players we'd picked out together. Rachel had gotten the promised job in Fargo and now traveled there 5 days a week. Sometimes, if the workload was particularly heavy, she stayed there overnight in a small rented room. On days like that, Connor usually stayed with me. Our relationship with my sister-in-law was strained but correct. We exchanged a minimum of words when we met, mostly concerning Connor. "I can't believe you have a roommate now," she said one day when she came to pick up her son. "Mariah is not a roommate," I corrected. "We're friends and housemates. We each have our own room, our own lives." Rachel grinned. "Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. Her innuendo didn't faze me. Mariah and I were really just friends, though we'd grown closer over the past few months than I could have expected. She understood my grief for Doris, didn't try to replace her. I respected her independence and autonomy. We were comfortable together, and that's what mattered. The day everything changed again, it was beautiful fall weather. Connor and I had just returned from a fishing trip, happy, though without a catch. Mariah was cooking dinner, whistling a tune. I was checking the mail I'd gotten out of my drawer. A bill, a commercial, more commercials, I muttered, thumbing through the envelopes. What's this? The envelope was official, with the logo of the law firm Bergman and Associates. I opened it and began to read. With each line, my face grew darker and darker. "Is something wrong, Grandpa?" Connor asked, noticing my expression. I folded the letter and tucked it into my pocket. "No, kid, nothing's wrong. Just boring adult stuff." He shrugged and went back to his phone. In his 15, Connor had stretched out even more, already almost catching up to me in height. His voice was starting to crack, and there was a bit of fuzz on his chin. He reminded me more and more of Felton at that age, and sometimes my heart sank at the resemblance. "Dinner's ready," Mariah called out from the kitchen. Over lunch we talked about fishing, about Connor's school, about the new TV show we were all three watching. But the letter was burning my pocket, and as soon as Connor went into the shower to wash off the smell of the river, I showed it to Mariah. "I'm being informed that Rachel has filed a lawsuit challenging Connor's trust fund. She claims I set it up to hide assets and deprive her of her rightful share from the sale of the house." Mariah read the letter carefully. "But that's absurd. The house was only your property. You had every right to dispose of the money from its sale however you wanted." "Of course it's absurd. But it's not the outcome of the trial that worries me. It's the fact itself. She promised not to try to access Connor's fund. I gave her $10,000, helped her with the apartment, didn't demand a refund, and now this." Mariah put a hand on my shoulder. "What are you going to do?" "Call a lawyer, of course. But first—" I glanced toward the bathroom where the sound of water was coming from. "I need to talk to Connor first." When Connor got out of the shower, I suggested he go for a walk. We went to a small park not far from the house and sat on a bench by the pond. The fall air was clear and fresh. The trees stood in their golden finery. "Connor, I need to ask you something," I began, trying to speak calmly. "Your mom, did she talk to you about the money from the sale of the house? About the trust fund?" He tensed. "A little bit. She said you put the money in some kind of trust and that I could get it when I was 21. That's true. But that's not all. The money in the fund can be used before that, for your education, or if you need serious medical treatment. Is that what she was talking about?" He shook his head. "No. She just said that if she had that money, she'd buy us a nice house instead of renting an apartment." I sighed. "I see. Did she mention that she's trying to challenge that fund through the courts?" Connor turned to me sharply. "What? No, she didn't say anything like that. I got a letter from a lawyer today. Your mom has filed a lawsuit to gain control of the foundation. She thinks she's entitled to some of the money from the sale of the house." "But why? I mean, we're doing okay now. She has a good job. We have a normal apartment." "I don't know, kid. Maybe she needs the money for something else. Or maybe she just can't accept that that money is just for you and no one else can control it." Connor was silent for a long time, looking at the water. Then he said quietly, "She's been talking a lot lately about moving to Fargo, about how there are better schools there, more opportunities. Maybe she wants to buy a house there." Maybe. I didn't bother to tell him that even if Rachel by some miracle won the lawsuit, she still couldn't use the money from the trust to buy a house. That would be against the terms of the trust agreement. "Grandpa, I don't want to move to Fargo," Connor said suddenly. "All my friends are here, and you're here, and I like my school." "I know, kid, but your mom makes the decision. She's your legal guardian." What if I wanted to live with you? I looked at him in surprise. Are you serious? Yes. I think about that a lot, especially lately. Mom's almost always at work or traveling. We rarely see each other. Even when she's home, she's on the phone all the time, dealing with work issues. And when she talks to me, it's only about how I need to study better to get into a good college. My heart squeezed at his words. I put my hand on his shoulder. Connor, I'd be happy if you lived with me, but this is a very big decision, and your mom would probably be against it. I know, he sighed. But maybe when I turn 16, I can decide for myself? That's soon enough, isn't it? That's not exactly how the law works, kid. But we can talk to a lawyer, see what the options are. Either way, know this. My door is always open to you. Always. We sat in the park for another hour or so, talking about all sorts of things. School, basketball, where Connor wanted to go after high school. He was getting more and more interested in computer science, thinking about a career as a computer programmer. Grand Forks University has a good computer science program, I remarked, and it's not far from here. You could live at home, save money on a dorm. That would be great, he smiled. When we got home, Mariah had already set the table for dinner. After we ate, Connor helped her wash the dishes and I called my lawyer, Alan Prater, and told him about the letter. Don't worry, Mr. Boyd, he said after I read him the contents. Mrs. Boyd doesn't stand a chance. The trust was set up legally with all the formalities. The money you put into it was exclusively yours. Neither your son nor his widow ever had any right to it. But she has filed suit, so some lawyer thinks she has a chance. Lawyers take on hopeless cases too if the client is willing to pay, Alan remarked dryly. I'll prepare an answer and file a motion for immediate dismissal of the suit. We probably won't even have to go to trial. After talking to the lawyer, I felt some relief, but the residue still remained. Rachel had violated our agreement. She was trying to get the money I had set aside for Connor's future. And to make matters worse, it looked like she was going to take him to Fargo, away from me. That night, after Connor went to bed, Mariah and I sat on the porch for a long time, looking up at the stars and talking quietly. You know, I think he was serious about living with you, she said. I can see the way he looks at you, how excited he gets when he comes here. Maybe, but Rachel would never agree, especially now that she's up to this trust thing. What if we offer her a compromise? Connor lives with us, goes to his school here, and she can visit him whenever she wants and pick him up on the weekends. I shook my head. I don't think she'd agree. It would mean admitting defeat to her, and Rachel isn't the type to admit defeat easily. Still, it's worth a try, for Connor's sake. The next day, Rachel came to pick up her son. I asked Connor to wait in the car and told her I'd gotten a letter from the lawyer. So? She crossed her arms over her chest. You didn't think I'd just accept the fact that you hid all the money, did you? I didn't hide the money, Rachel. I secured Connor's future, and you promised not to try to access the trust. That was a condition you agreed to. Circumstances have changed, she shrugged. I need the money to buy a house in Fargo. It's in Connor's best interest to live in a big city with better schools and opportunities. And have you asked Connor what he wants? He doesn't want to move to Fargo. All his friends are here. His school is here. He's a kid. He doesn't understand what's best for him, she cut him off. I'm his mother, and I decide where we're going to live. Rachel, listen, I tried to speak calmly. Connor's going to be a teenager soon. In a couple years, he'll be able to decide for himself who he wants to live with. If you force him to move out against his will, it's only going to ruin your relationship. Are you threatening me? Her eyes narrowed. You think I don't know you're turning him against me? All these fishing trips, camping trips, the new room in your house. You're trying to buy his love. That's not true, and you know it. I just want to be a part of his life, and I want him to be happy. He'll be happy in Fargo, with new friends at a new school, Away from all of this, she circled her hand around as if pointing to all of Grand Forks. Rachel, please think about Connor, not yourself. What if he lived here with me and you could visit him whenever you wanted? Take him away on weekends, on vacations. Don't even dream about it, she almost shouted. He's my son, and he's going to live with me. And no court in the world will give him to you, old man. I am his mother, his only living parent. With those words, she turned around and walked quickly to her car. I watched her get behind the wheel as the car started up. Connor waved at me from the window and I waved back, feeling my heart clench. Over the next few weeks, I talked to Alan Prather often about the progress of the case. As he had predicted, the court dismissed Rachel's claim at the preliminary hearing. The judge indicated that she had no basis to claim the money I had put into a trust for my grandson. The day the official notice of dismissal came, I called Rachel. She didn't pick up. I left a message offering to talk, to find a compromise for Connor's sake. She didn't call back. For the next 2 weekends, Connor didn't show up. Rachel told him I had some business to attend to, that I'd asked to reschedule the meetings myself. I only found out about it when he texted me, "Grandpa, is everything okay? Mom said you're really busy." I immediately called him. Luckily, Rachel was at work and we were able to have a frank conversation. I told him about the court order, about his mother not letting him come to me because of it. He listened in silence and then said, "I guess something was wrong. She's been acting weird lately. Keeps talking about moving, going to look at houses in Fargo." "She has a right to move, Connor. She's your mother." "I know, but I don't want to leave you, Grandpa." His words touched me to the core. "We'll figure something out, kid. I promise." After that conversation, I began consulting with lawyers about the possibility of getting partial custody of Connor. It was a complicated process, especially since I wasn't his parent, only his grandfather. But all the lawyers agreed that in my case there was a chance. I was actively involved in my grandson's life. I had a stable income and suitable living conditions. The situation was resolved in the most unexpected way. One evening, while Mariah and I were watching TV, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood Connor with a large backpack. "Can I stay with you for a while?" he asked, shuffling from foot to foot. We, of course, let him in, gave him hot cocoa, and asked him what was wrong. Turns out he and Rachel had had a big fight. She announced that they were moving to Fargo in a month, that she had already signed a contract to buy a house there, that he would be transferred to a new school. I told her I didn't want to move, that I wanted to stay here with you. She got really mad, said you were turning me against her, that you were manipulating me with the money in the trust. "Oh, Connor, I know that's not true, Grandpa. I'm not a little kid anymore. I can see what's going on. Mom, she's changed since Daddy died. She's different. She's always thinking about money, status, what people will say. And you're just always there for her. No pressure, no demands. You just love me." I hugged him, feeling a lump rise to my throat. "Of course I do, kid. You're all I have left of Felton, my only grandson. So I can stay?" I glanced over to Mariah. She nodded. "Of course you can. Your room is always ready. But we need to talk to your mom. Legally, you're still in her custody." "I know," he lowered his head. "But maybe if I insist, she'll agree? I'm about to turn 16, and in some cases the court considers the teenager's opinion when determining residency." "You're right, but let's try to settle this peacefully first. I'll call her tomorrow, tell her you're here and okay, and then I'll suggest we meet and discuss the situation." I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about the future, about Connor, about Rachel, about our house with Mariah, which had recently seemed such a cozy refuge from all our problems, but now it could become a new battlefield. In the morning, I called Rachel. After a long conversation full of accusations and threats, she still agreed to meet. We saw each other at a neutral place, a coffee shop downtown. Connor insisted on attending. The conversation was long and difficult. Rachel cried, screamed, threatened to sue. But when Connor firmly stated that he wasn't going to Fargo, that he'd run away again if he had to, she finally started to listen. "I'm not trying to take him away from you, Rachel," I said, when she calmed down a little. "I'm just suggesting a solution that's best for everyone. Connor lives with me and Mariah, goes to his school, stays with his friends. You can visit him whenever you want, take him out on weekends, vacations. We can make it official through the courts, if you want." Rachel was silent for a long time, looking at her son. Then she asked quietly, "Is that really what you want, Connor? To live with Grandpa instead of me?" "Mom, I love you," he covered her hand with his. "But yes, right now I want to stay in Grand Forks, with my friends, at my school. That doesn't mean I don't want to see you. We'll keep in touch. I'll come visit you." Tears stood in her eyes, but she held back. "Okay, if that's what you really want, I won't stand in your way, but we'll make it official. I'm not giving up my parental rights." "Of course not," I nodded. "No one's asking for that." Thus began a new chapter in our lives. With the help of lawyers, we formalized a joint custody agreement for Connor. He lived in our house on Maple Alley, and Rachel moved to Fargo as planned. She came every weekend, sometimes taking him to her house. Gradually, her anger and resentment subsided, especially when she saw Connor blossom by staying in familiar surroundings. I never spoke ill of her in front of my grandson, nor did I ever try to turn him against his mother. On the contrary, I always encouraged their interactions, reminded her of her birthday, offered to buy her gifts for the holidays. It wasn't easy, given everything that had happened between us, but I did it for Connor's sake. And oddly enough, over time it became sincere. Not that I forgave Rachel or forgot her words and actions, but I stopped actively disliking her. Mariah has been a real blessing in this situation. She took on a role that was hard to define. Not a grandmother, not a mother, but a wise and caring woman, always willing to listen, to help with advice, to cook her favorite meal. Connor quickly became attached to her, often asked for help with homework, especially in literature, which Mariah, a former librarian, knew perfectly. Our home became exactly what I had always dreamed of: warm, cozy, filled with life and love. We often gathered in the living room in the evenings, me in my chair with the newspaper, Mariah on the couch with her knitting, Connor at the table with his textbooks or computer. An ordinary family scene, but for me, who had lost first my wife, then my son, and then nearly lost my grandson, it was infinitely precious. Sometimes, sitting on the porch and watching Connor fiddling in the garden, helping Mariah with her flowers, I thought about how strange things had turned out. I'd lost the house I'd lived in most of my life, the house that seemed to be the center of all my memories and hopes. But instead, I gained something much more precious: a new family, a new home, a new meaning of life. And I realized an important truth. A real home is not the walls, the roof, or the things that fill the space. A real home is people who love and respect you, people with whom you feel safe, with whom you can be yourself without fear of judgment or manipulation. Sometimes you need to lose possessions to gain self-respect and peace. Sometimes you have to give up the past to make room for the future. And sometimes the hardest trials end up leading to the most valuable discoveries. My new house was smaller and more modest than the old one. It didn't have the room where Felton was born. It didn't have the kitchen where Doris made her famous pies. It didn't have the porch where we sat on summer evenings watching the sunset. But it had something that had been missing in the last few years in the old house: respect, warmth, sincerity. And for that, it was worth going through all the trials, worth losing everything material to gain the spiritual. After all, as I had often told Connor, home is not where you live. Home is where you are understood.